was really, yeah. So I welcome all of you, and it's such a, it was a very, very, interesting journey for all of us, because we started with an orientation program for the people before they submitted their entries. So we reversed the process. Usually we select the fellows and do the orientation. But this time we did the orientation and then asked people to submit proposals based on the topics that we covered in the orientation program. So we had received many entries, and out of that we have selected these 15, keeping in mind the need to have as many voices as possible, in terms of the, oh, sorry. Just a minute, Big Basket decides to come just now. One second. Correct time to say, and a meeting also in the meeting could have started. Kitchen. It just until 12:30 was started.
Having changes to the memo. ఈ టేబుల్ మీద పెట్టాలా మేడం? అదే కిచెన్ టేబుల్ పైన.
Done orientation, we selected it. Our intention was to get as much diversity in the fellows as possible from different states, in different languages, and also, print and web media. So we tried very hard to get a diverse group of fellows, this year. Every year we try to do it. And they have written very good articles, and they have done a lot of work. And every year we thought that we should give a feedback, or we should at least use this opportunity to, talk about certain issues in reporting on gender issues. So that is what we have done. And it's a pleasure that we have with us today Rajeshwari Kalyanam, who's been a great supporter of Ladli. She was so many programs. So I'm looking forward to her insights into the articles, and also sharing her own experiences as a journalist and writing about gender issues. So I welcome all the participants, all the fellows, and Rajeshwari once again. Over to you, Rajeshwari.
Thank you so much, Sharda. Let me thank you. I mean, a vote of thanks comes in the end, but let me thank you for giving me this opportunity, which I took it up with little apprehensively, because reading is something we don't do often nowadays, because we only write. So, and reading 70 articles, almost 70 odd articles, was a little kind of imposing for me in terms of when I thought of it. But when I started reading, they were so interesting, especially articles written with gender perspective, and there's so many perspectives, so many things that we always read about, but a different angle to it, a different face of it that we don't know, or we don't talk about, we forget. All these they were very stimulating for me as a person who likes to write about gender issues and who likes to read about more such stories in the media. And as usual, when I do this, I feel, though I am doing the masterclass now, you've all inspired me to, because we do kind of sometimes fall into a kind of a system where we don't see things beyond what we see on the face of it. And it's very inspirational as a journalist for me to read these stories. So I think thank you for that. Whatever I'm doing today is basically going to just give you my views of what could be done. Not that you haven't thought of it, but it would perhaps be useful to you or to others who may find something interesting from it. It's always been the case with me. So it's more like my views of the articles and my views of what I thought of them, what could be done. That said, I was just mentioning to Sharda that I congratulate all the people who have been very sensitive in their writing. They have, it felt like you have taken your orientation seriously. And I think that was a good thing you have done, Sharda, that orientation was done first, because I think that gives the perspective to how you can think. And these people have thought of different subjects. It's just not about subjects, how they dealt with it, how they've been sensitive about mentioning people, the terms that they use and the way they think. I think that is definitely showing up, and the importance of research, importance of the terminology that we use was all there. Perhaps a little less here, a little more there, which is what I'll point out now. So while doing this, I have read so many stories, so I need a little reminder for myself. So I will open a couple of stories. I'll take a couple of a minute or half a minute every time I change the person's name. So I just went by, I thought I'll deal with Hindi articles first, and then I started reading Nilesh Tripaঠি's articles in News 18. And that was, I think, नक्सलियों से सीधी लड़ाई के लिए तैयार हैं ट्रांसजेंडर, बोले लोगों ने सिर्फ हमारा नाच गाना देखा है लेकिन अब. So basically it's a very inspiring thing that the government and police department is kind of opened up this opportunity for transgenders, and the story basically brings to fore the kind of work that the people have done, the transgenders have done, to trans people have done to kind of work for it. Obviously, they have to be selected to be. This is an important, I think, wing of the police department where they deal directly with the Naxalites, and evidently the training and the selection will be quite strenuous. And I think Nilesha, you have done a great job at putting it all together. ये इंसान समझे जाने की जंग. They're very. All your stories have been inspirational. They're well written, good research, narration, presentation. I think you followed the journalistic principles. I think that is where I would like to point out, since I have the opportunity, and maybe I'll be telling later also, that when you write a story, then gender perspective is fine, good. That is the major kind of, that is the major objective of our articles. But gender perspective without a sense of storytelling will obviously see in today's generation, today's news media, we know whatever challenges we face of people making people read a story. Now we can't do clickbaits. We can do see, headlines have always been trying to hook people to the readers, which is not bad. So we can have the headlines like that without being too sensational or too deviating. Staying to the point and making the headlines interesting has always been a journalistic quality. So now the headlines is one thing. Second is getting the person into the story in the first 2-3 lines. Now that is very important because we are writing such important stories. So much work has gone into this story. And I mean, kind of, you've done research, you've talked to people, you've taken so much time and effort. So for making people read it, the first few lines, what we call an intro in a journalistic story, that is very important. A few people have kind of fallen back on that. So what happens then is when you read the story, since I am having the job of reading the story, I will continue reading the story because I have to see where it's going, why you've written it. But not everybody does it online. Kitna hota hai, attention span seconds mein hota hai. So we have newer people who are writing about gender issues, gender problems. We have a problem that there's not enough space in the media. Now when we get space, we have to make sure people read our stories. Okay, so the challenge is to kind of hook them into the first 2-3 seconds. That's the today's rate of how people change to the next channel. I think that way Nilesh has been great. And next I've read Parikshit Nirbhay's stories in Amar Ujala. मेरे हाथों में पड़े निशान बयां करे. So they are all घरेलू हिंसा के बारे में है वो. बेटियों की मजबूरी, भरोसा, शिक्षा अधूरी. हाँ, बेसिकली वो मोबाइल फोन्स के ना देने से बेटियों की जो कोरोना के टाइम पे जो शिक्षा का ये अधूरापन रह गया था, and then how it has been challenging and how technology has affected the children. So these are the 2-3 stories. I think you've done 4 stories again. So very important. Let me tell you, Parikshit, that your articles are very important. They have touched upon very important aspects. घरेलू हिंसा के बारे में जितना भी बात करें उतना कम है, and it's about how we talk about newer perspectives in it. Now, what I have written my point as that it is a data driven article which is very important. So could have been more analytical. So be more perspectives. What happens is when we do research, we get a lot of data. Now we shouldn't be drawn into the data. What happens is when we are drawn into the data and we mention too much of data, then this, imagine reading 2-3 paras of data, this much, they are all important. They're important for our story. They have to be mentioned. Now you can't make it only about the data. So you have to use the data to draw your perspective. And because you're a journalist and a writer, you have to, what you're thinking, that should be presented. Now, for this to happen, we can always use these data tools, like you can use graphs, you can use tabular forms. Perhaps you could use them and kind of make it a little more easier to read the data and use the data to talk about your point. What are you trying to say with this data is more important. Data is a proof, basically. You cannot obviously say things without any proof or some data which supports your claims. So that is very important. Now, presenting this data interestingly, so that the reader doesn't get bored and still understands your point of view, is very important. So what happens is too much of data will deviate your interest, deviate the attention, and whatever you say may get just mixed up in the data. Too many details. They say you get lost in the details. That will happen. So perhaps a little bit more on the views and discourses. Basically, if you could have probably made it a little more, you could have talked to people and brought their perspectives to kind of talk about your views, would have made this article very strong. Whatever you said the article is good, but as a general reader, this would have made it stronger, and this would have made it more, the reach would be more. So I think today I'll be talking more about the reach, I think, in a lot of articles, because that's very important in today's world where, again, I'm repeating that you have people who are reading are becoming less, people who are watching videos are becoming more, and whatever happens, all these reels and what kind of information goes there. And our job has become more challenging and more issues that we have to talk about. Now, कोरोना के टाइम पे जो लड़कियों को जो मोबाइल नहीं मिला, इतना important article है, because imagine, first of all, getting girl educated is a problem after a certain age for 101 reasons, which you always talk about. Now, during Corona, what happened was, though they were sitting at home and studying, because there would only be so many devices at home, preference would be given to boys. I mean, that is such a sad thing. And so basically, in that also, what happens is you kind of missed out on certain details to authenticate your claim or support your claim. So I think what happened is you have created an opening, because all these articles are important. Perhaps what you could do is take this forward and explore more what's happening and how many girls have stopped education, they come back to schools. There is so much you could explore based on, perhaps if my views could help you get more stories. I think that's the whole intention of a fellowship, where you start doing stories and you'll continue to discover more perspectives, and you'll continue to create more impact through your stories. So Ina Goyal, Gorakhpur Newsline, Sangam ke hashiye par kinnar akhada. Oh yeah, that was a very good story. It started with description of the situation of what you generally see in akhada, practices, people's belief systems. Basically, this is about, I think, Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi, who's been given a place in, where is it? It is in Sangam, na? Yeah, it's at Sangam. And then imagine where they were perhaps not get any, where Kinnar people do not get any importance. People come here, worship her, there are queues for her, which in a way is creating that space for Kinnar. But again, in a way, there's religion in it. And in a way, it's actually dividing people also over religion, how her views on this. So it's a good thing that you brought all these into focus. And I was happy. I was reading and the story, I was getting a little concerned, but towards the end, you also bring in the crucial divide based on religion, and that is something which that story is, I think, touched upon all the aspects. The impact or the goal of this article, I'm not sure, but perhaps it definitely raises a lot of questions. So again, I say, when I give you my views, perhaps this could lead to another story who somebody else can work on the story, or you yourself can work on the story of how there is this religious divide that we see, this division of people that we see. How is it affecting women or transgenders? Because the kind of struggle we are having to create on a lot of issues which are yet to be solved, they get more complicated because of this religious divide. So another good story that you have done is on health challenges of trans men, and I think there also you have a great opportunity for greater analysis, discussion. Perhaps you could do more stories. So there is Muntaha from Kashmir Observer. Is there a good news? Endless agony of Kashmiri childless women. I think that's one story that hooked me. The presentation, the theme, there's an impact that's for the story. I think journalistic style of writing, it ticks all the right boxes. I think even the highly educated women, they get into this guilt trip about not having children and what's happening in Kashmir. I think it's very, very well done. And she's done one story on the facility at Bahrar. I hope I'm saying it right. The leprosy survivors. I think that was really nice. I think that's how I think when people from various regions write about stories, we do write about larger issues which are impacting or which are affecting all the women and the trans people and everyone else, but in India. But when you are also writing from your own area, it's interesting and important that you also concentrate on bringing stories that aren't always talked about, bring stories from the hinterlands which perhaps people like us do not know. So I think that's one way. I think Muntaha, you have done that. I think I was so kind of impressed with all the stories. I mean, especially because even as a reader, yes, I'm a journalist, but as a reader, I was amazed with these stories. So Purnima Saha Behen Box, I think that's Purnima. I think congratulations. Your effort shows in your stories. I think that's something very important. So why sugarcane cutters of Maharashtra seek needless hysterectomies? It's brilliant, well researched. Pardhis ke baare mein ek aur story hai. But if she had a voice, rural Maharashtra, losing husband means losing right to life. See, all these are very good, great. And in the stories of Pardhis, I see a lot of opportunity for more stories there. So perhaps that could be your first opening into that world, and you could probably think of more stories to write. And this is from Behen Box. I think congratulations to Behen Box also to be kind of encouraging journalists and giving them the space to write a nice, well-researched story. I think one of the writers did not have that space, and her stories were very good. I will perhaps look at the name, but they were very short. They were very when you know this, it's like the story is starting and she ends it there. So I think perhaps there's this kind of there's a word count I do not know. And Srinivas Pilalmari from Hyderabad, I think, he's there. Hi, Srinivas. It's not enough how often we talk about these subjects. I think he's talked about domestic violence. I'm not exactly sure. As I told you, I read so many stories that I told you I will just once in a while. Mother tongue plays a crucial role in treating Adivasi patients and saving lives. And that's one story you've written. When women fail to get due recognitions as farmers. Yeah. So Srinivas says, I have read both your stories. I feel, as I said, women farmers ka issues ke baare mein jitna kha jaye utna kam hai. And there's a lot of research that's happening. A lot of people in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana who are working on this. Lot of NGOs, there are a few very significant NGOs and a lot of women farmers in various fields, various areas who are working. So I feel your article is amazing, very important, but you can kind of perhaps go into a little more statistics and some analysis and probably speak to these people, and all this will definitely give an edge to this very important topic that you've written about. And as I said, your articles, there is a lot of scope for research, and there's a lot of scope for more work that could be done journalistically. I think those are very good topics that you've chosen, but I feel there is so much more you can do. you have it within not very far off, within your arm's reach. I think a lot of people are working. It's about getting them to talk to you. That will be nice. Ridhima Gupta. Few hours to Telangana teachers eligibility exam ke bare mein hai. This is in News 18. The report is okay. I am reading my own notes. So this is very few hours were given to Telangana teachers exam for CWDs. So basically, the challenged disabled people they get their they get an assistant to write an exam, and there was a lot of confusion over it. So almost no compliance of RTE, keep CWDs out of schools. But what is happening in your stories is that I hope I'm kind of, you are able to understand how she has written about CWDs. And how there have been government exams where they were not getting proper scribes, and there were a lot of confusion, and how some of them lost opportunity. They did not know till last minute what to do, and a couple of other stories. So what I feel in your stories is that they need more details, and this is a very important report. I wish they get for front pages, because this is something very important. I mean, government has given a few. They have a lot of facilities, but if they are not given to them properly, and what's the point of having them? And we have to talk about them so that it doesn't happen next time. And they should get front page space. But analyzing, for examples, basically talking to people, analyzing what happened, and this, as I said, how many CWDs in schools are actually in mainstream schools. For example, she's written about being included into the mainstream schools and how they do not get space. And the article also has to be more inclusive, have more quotes from women people, spokespeople, because I think as we said, that also is a very important criteria, where we do talk to a lot of experts, but we end up talking to men. So because one, they are easily available, because they're always called upon, all the panels which are there, all the television panels there, you see a lot of men. So you don't see women, and when you think of them, perhaps you don't know them. But I think a little bit of work will actually change this, and we have to consciously make an effort. See, there are a few things for which we have to consciously make an effort. Why can't you have men talking to you about an important topic when they're experts? Yes, you should have them, but you should also look for women, because they are out there. There are a lot of women, very well qualified women, working in these fields, working in these areas. It's just for us to know them. When you write about them, then others will know that there's somebody like this. So certain things we have to consciously work around them, and otherwise we won't be able to make a change. Because I think not finding them, not knowing is what is actually the easiest reason these television channels say when they say, why don't you bring women onto your discussion panel? Similarly, we have to ensure there are a lot of women talking to you. So basically, there's a lot of scope for you there also, Ridhima. You should, but one thing I should congratulate you on is that you have written extensively on CWDs, which is not often talked about in media. I think that is again a conscious effort we all should make about how we should. I mean, all of these articles, let me again talk to you about these articles, how you have spoken about certain subjects, especially they do not have enough space. And congratulations for bringing all of these into fore. Rini East Mojo. Oh, I was reading these stories and I was hoping that Rini gets a chance to write in mainstream. When I say mainstream, not just Northeast publications. East Mojo perhaps is, I hope it's online, so I hope everybody gets to read it, because she's made a very good attempt at bringing the stories of Assam, from stories of successful women from Assam and from Northeast, stories from Northeast. One of it is about the women football team. That's my favorite. And Hargile by the Purnima Barman's story, I felt it would have been explored aspect of women steering the conservation effects. Okay, there's that Purnima Barman, who is a conservationist. Her story she's talked about, and I feel there is a one second. Kindly hold on. Sorry if there was a disturbance. So that's about the conservation of a bird which is going extinct, and I feel that's a very good story. But it talks about conservation efforts happening, and it talks about the issue in totality. I think there is a very important opportunity there about how she has done it, and also all the other women who are part of it, because Purnima always is always in the news. I mean, she's already in the news. It's interesting to see how others have joined her. Perhaps you could also explore those stories about other women, how they've got inspired by her. That would have made it a complete story, I feel. That's again, but that said, there are a very good bunch of stories. And here, I think what you have tried to do is bring these stories out for people to read. That is a good attempt. As I said, I wish these stories were in the other media, like national media. So we do not, that's again another thing that I just hope we get to write more. You write about Northeastern stories, and earlier days it used to be only print media. Now it's electronic, now it's websites. So I think we should use our Ladli Media Network to perhaps spread these stories, share them, so that if others finding it interesting, maybe others could explore, or if they are doing some conservation stories, they could take some inputs and resources from Purnima through you. It could always be a mutually exchanging of views, exchanging of resources, so that it tells more stories from across India. I think this network has to be used like that also, I feel. Swati Thapa. She's talked about, I think her articles is on pay parity. I've written here, congratulations, Swati. I am sure I loved your articles. So I made a lot of notes for myself, because I know after post-corona, we are becoming forgetful. So I wrote here, sometimes when we continue to write about, often talked about issues like pay parity, domestic violence, especially when there is not necessarily a context in terms of newsroom peg, it is a question. It is a major question from the editor saying, why now? Unless somebody is dying, unless somebody is having a problem, unless somebody has made news, unless there's some issue, we do not get space to write about a particular issue. They say, अरे फिर से पे पैरिटी के बारे में, फिर से डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस के बारे में, क्यों? कोरोना के टाइम पे बहुत ज्यादा हो गया, तो हमको लिखने का मौका मिल गया था. And we wrote about, I see a lot of people here also wrote about issues, not just domestic violence in the face of it, but other aspects of it. So how many times do we get that chance? I think she has managed to do that by bringing newer perspectives. She's expanded the reach and included more sections of the community, and that is something which makes her story special. Because we have to talk about these issues more often. How do we do it? We cannot say the same thing again. The data is there. We cannot keep repeating the data and say, okay, this is there, this is there. We have to also, as a journalist, try to look at other, there are so many stories. Now I see, like I was actually there at Ladli Media Awards. I saw like so many stories. I was reading about so many stories, and I was thinking, yes, there are so many stories. Now here, when I see these fellowship articles, I again have the same feeling. So it's all about looking and seeing and watching and reading perhaps. I think thanks to you guys, I read more such articles that have given me more ideas. So similarly, we should also start reading more. I think reading more also in a way improves your thought process, and it incites you into thinking, and it kind of triggers that particular place where you think of ideas. I think when you start reading, you start thinking and start getting more ideas. So I think we should all read all the stories of the fellowship articles that like I have done, and I'm sure each of you will find newer perspectives. I think Swati Thapa's articles has done just that. It has spoken again about domestic violence, pay parity. It has spoken about issues with a newer perspective. She's included more communities. She's made the scope, like if it was like this, she kind of expanded the scope, brought in more people. So that way it has become an important and a distinct article again. So she has also written an article on alcoholism and what it does and how it's basically considered to be an important, a very kind of for domestic violence, how alcoholism affects. And I'm not open the article. I can just give you the 1 second. Swati Thap, sorry. So it's like why men drink and hit women. Why alcohol is not just a lifestyle choice for millions. I think here also she's explored not just about alcoholism but she's kind of explored more into it. On the face of it, yes, people who drink and come, they beat women. But why don't they beat them? Why don't the man go and beat his boss? why doesn't he beat anybody on the road, and why does he come home and beat women? Again, the issue comes, and then she's kind of explored that bit. And women in hospitality battling gender bias and additional barriers compared to their male counterparts. So this is again, as I said, the topics may sound very similar, but I found that she has kind of explored a different side to these very, very important and they must be written about as often as possible kind of articles. And I think that gives us other people a lot of ideas about what can be done, how can it be done, because that's again another challenge, how to include these issues into the mainstream journalism, how to convince our bosses that we should write a story around this. So that is something she's very successfully done, and we should take a kind of tips out of her approach. Sneha Mutha, yeah. She has written on organic farming, important articles, organic farming beyond the outer surface, objective clarity. So what has happened is she's written on very important articles, and as I said, I think I'm repeating myself when I'm saying every one of you, as I'm reading, you can see what I mean when I say that. See, this is about trans people are employed, but they're not accepted being trans in a workplace, lack of data representation versus transgender employment woes, meet women farmers, the missing link in our action plan, empowering at exhausting, organic dilemma of women farmers, domestic violence, law perfect on paper, falters in action. So what I feel is, her articles are again important articles. Again, I don't want to repeat myself, but let's say when you're writing an article, don't get lost in your article. I mean, organic farming, for example, it is again a very exhaustive article, very interesting. But what happens is when everyone is writing a story, when we are writing a story, we have to be clear on what objective are, why are we writing this story. So once we are clear on that, and what you have to ensure that the clarity is there throughout the article. Sometimes when we are doing so much of work, it's not that we can't do it, but we end up not doing it because we are hard pressed for time. We can't go back to the story, and we there's so much. Sometimes when we do too much of work for an article, there's so much data that you get lost in our own. That has happened with me. And what happens then is when we are writing, we want to include everything. It's like that film director who makes a 3-hour film because he cannot cut any of his film. So you have to be very, very clear about what you want to portray, what you want to cut, because at the end of it, brevity, clarity, objective are all very important for people to read our articles. So you cannot just write huge articles, and you have to ensure the presentation, ensuring. This, of course, doesn't refer to Snehal's article alone. Generally, I'm saying that you have to kind of perhaps make it kind of divide it into paras. That data, as I said, there are very important, interesting tools. I think a lot of you could use your own, put your data and create your graphs. Or if you have help in office, that's even bigger offices have these people who do graphics. Ask them to do graphics for you, make it all graphical representation, and then explain that. That is easier to understand, especially when there's a lot to talk about. So organic farming is one such article where I thought there could be a better clarity on your objective of why you're writing the article. But again, these are all workable things. As I said, when we write important articles, when we do a lot of work behind them, it's also important to convey it to the reader. That is the least responsibility we have for ourselves after having worked hard on a story. I think she's written for Indie Journal. Sanhati Banerjee is another person. I loved her stories. I mean, see, basically, it's about. Again, I said it has to start with a peg, and I think that is where when somebody, when I say I loved her stories, I loved her stories from starting to end. I didn't have to go to the middle of the story for me to understand that, okay, this is a very important article, this is a very important topic that we should talk about. Sometimes that happened with me in some of the articles. Perhaps everyone could just check on themselves to see if they are doing this, but you can't read through the article after third paragraph or fourth paragraph if you start writing on the actual article. I don't think many of your readers would stay so long in this age, especially when people are reading it on internet. So you have to ensure that you have these you have these highlighters. You have to ensure the intro is good. Without see what web is nothing. It's nothing. Sometimes I feel we complicate web too much and make it too simplified sometimes, or too complicated sometimes, and we think people don't read, so we end up writing small articles, which is not necessary. It's all about hooking your reader to your article. You could kind of have your highlighters, blurbs. You could have your paragraphs and side headings. All this we've learned in our print journalism. We just have to translate these things that we've learned into web space, perhaps even more effective. Perhaps I don't mind articles having a little catchy headlines. Some of them have. I just try to read them to see if there's anything wrong with them. So long as there's nothing wrong with them, you're not kind of sensationalizing in a bad way. As I said again in the beginning itself, that having a good headline is not wrong. So you have to make a person read your article. Headline is first thing. Second thing is your intro, and then just ensure you don't get carried away. Just make it very clear and make it easily readable. So I think Sanhita Banerjee, I think has done just that. She's made a good. It is a good story. It has kind of hooked me on for reading. After all the 50, I think I've read her articles towards the end, and so yeah. Imagine after reading like 40 articles, I'm reading her article, and still I was reading the entire of it. So you should not feel like, okay, I'll skip this and read this. So this is one thing. So she written about the inside the four walls of intimate partner violence in India. Shocking. Yeah. So in her article, why I liked it so much, I have made a point here. I remember that it was not. See, one of the things that Sharda also asked me to do, we also see when people are writing a story, is not make it too like a sad story, like a feature story where we talk about bas dukh bhari kahaniyan with poetry laga ke, so that people are like almost crying when they're reading. Not necessary. We can still be journalists. We can be matter of fact and put. आजकल फैक्ट्स ही इतने खराब है ना, वो बस है टीयर jerkers के लिए. We don't have to create additional baggage to kind of create that impact. What we are talking about are such issues that are so shocking, that are so revealing, and as you peel the onion, it becomes even more shocking. So those facts itself are heartrending enough. So you don't have to create any poetry around it. And she's done that. She's written about the some of the issues in that intimate partner violence, जो बहुत ही important issue है. वो issue में इतने सारे 2-3 story. I mean, she had talked to people and she has given them their stories. They're very shocking to read. But she didn't. She was very controlled in her narration. She did not overdo anything anywhere, and it still looked very journalistic and still very heart touching, and it made us think. So that's one thing. And again, another point I was all through telling you about how to weave the data into the story and still make it an interesting read. I think that's what she's been able to do it. So that is something that's why I like reading Sanhita's Banerjee stories and Livewire. She also has written a story on nurses as soft targets. And so this is something which So I have made, these are all my homework. I have made a lot of notes. So I'm just checking wherever I am. Sometimes we can't help it but put the data forward. Sometimes we can't. So sometimes we can get away with saying just a little bit of the data, but sometimes you have to bring a lot of data. There are a lot of people who will talk to you. Now, how to put everybody? See, you will talk to 10 people. Now you have to put everybody's. Otherwise, they'll be, you have spoken to so many people. They'll be looking forward to reading their quote. All this happens. This is the real world. So, but you try to create a thing where perhaps some of the quotes you don't put it into the narrative, so that the story doesn't become boring. What happens is somebody has said the same thing again and again. Perhaps you could just take out a portion where they have not repeated. Or maybe put that particular quote in a box and rest everything perhaps a part of the story. What I'm saying is that at the end of it, you should ensure that the story doesn't deviate here and there. It doesn't become very tasking to read it. It has to be it has to be crisp and nice and to read. Only then when people are reading is when they're able to understand it. So Bhaskar.com, Sabita. Yeah, Sabita, nice articles. Yeah, पिता बनने के जिम्मेदारी से निभाने से पीछे हट रहे युवा. I think that is a brilliant topic. See, we talk about she talked about how women, of course, are harassed if they're not interested in having babies. Now that's a big curse, and then that's something a taboo. And then if they don't, for any reason, they don't get to have children. I think that was another article also talked about it. That's like torture at home. Now there are also a lot of young men who don't want to take responsibility, who fear the responsibility, and they are the people who said we do not want children. And suddenly, if women have children, they're abandoned. They don't get support. They don't get financial support. That is such an important story. Another story she's written about is Naukri Ke Naam Par Patna Laya. Basically, this is about the orchestra girls who dance and sing in Bihar who are brought from Patna, Delhi. Again, like in prostitution, they are told that we will marry you or whatever for many reasons, or for employment, they are brought here. And they are forced to get into this singing and dancing against their will. And they are made to not go back by doing various, a lot of things happen with them so that they can't go back to their place, their homes. And they're kind of stuck here dancing. Now, these are two such important articles. I only have one problem with this. Dainik Bhaskar, I don't know if they allow you to write bigger stories, longer stories, or if I couldn't read it because of technical problems. But they were very small. I mean, you just gave me the intro. Where is the story? I think I'm dying to read the story. I'm dying to read how are they, what are they doing, and the men, women, talk to them, get all these details. I think you have opened, what do you call that, can of worms, they say, no? So you have opened the box and left it there, and you have to now just pick the worms and kind of put it all together for the story. I think if you are working on these stories, I think you will be getting a very impactful stories in your hand. That is not something you have to take care of. And as I was mentioning, the data representation is one thing I've already covered. That there are various ways of doing it. I think we should have. There's some. This is a subject in journalism. I know a friend of mine who studied in the US, creating graphics. So, but we could still create smaller graphics. આજકાલ, there are a lot of tools available, easier tools. Canva is one. Story structure, as I said, it has to have the structure. What we learned in journalism schools, please apply into even web journalism. Story structure is very important. Objective and clarity I spoke about, and conscious effort to add value. Now, I said conscious effort to add resources, conscious effort to add women voices into the stories. Conscious effort also has to be made to create value for it. We know this has to be talked. Domestic violence has to be talked about. Pay parity has to be talked about. कितने बार बात करेंगे और कितने भी बार बात करें तो until there is an impact, that is the objective, that we should keep talking about it. But when we are writing about it and we are talking about a certain thing that has happened, we have to make an effort to add our value to it. Try to look for more. How are we going to add value? Can be in different ways. So I think this bunch of these stories are an example of how we can add value to often talked about and often must talk about issues. I think that is something we have to follow. We have to remember, basically, that we have to add some value to anything that we write. We cannot simply repeat the fact that there's domestic violence and this is the data of 2022. Yes, the 2022 का data ये है. 2022, 21, 22, 20, 23 का क्या projection है? Why it's happening? And what is happening? Any states are there or any places are there which have done something different to reduce the impact? So if there is a data given, the data analyze karna is another important aspect. Maybe we can take help. We can take help of the experts and bring their voices in to make this happen. So that is very important. It's not just saying, but adding value and giving your analytics is what makes you different. What is why you are here. So that is something very important. Otherwise, reporting ban jayega na. Your article thodi rahega. It will be just reporting about every day something comes up and any news comes up and some data comes in and then you just mention that. But I'm telling you, once you start analyzing that data, that you will have 10 stories in each data. So that is the beauty of data. The data, if you read it properly, I don't know if we have time for it. So we perhaps could go to an expert who's already analyzed it, talk to him, as I said, read, talk, and then get ideas and then explore. So there are a lot of ways of doing it. See, what we know, we have challenges, right? We have to work around these challenges. Along with challenges, we also have opportunities. Behenbox, feminismindia.com, and so many other websites. I think I'm looking at them, and then I'm glad that they have given the space to us to write these articles. So similarly, we have a lot of opportunities. We have a whole of internet at our fingertip. So we can, how we use it to add value is what makes the article different. So that is how you get resources. Just do a little Google research. You can add, you can even compare with other countries which are doing better in this area, perhaps. So that is one thing. And I'm not covered a couple of articles which I thought in Odia, Tamil or Malayalam ka maine, I have read the translations. Just give me a minute. I'll just go to them and tell you exactly what I think of. I so far I hope it's okay. Ashada, is there anything you want me to add?
No. It's very, very interesting. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. No, I think.
Now I lost. 1 second. Is it from your end or from my end?
No, ma'am, your voice is breaking.
Voice. Pooja, voice. Is it a problem I have or is it okay?
No, Chandra, we cannot hear you properly. Ma'am, we cannot hear you properly.
I think the notes and then try to build in all those, because it's a journey that we keep learning.
Yeah.
Can you hear now?
Yeah, now I can hear.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that the inputs that you have given are very useful, and I hope all the participants will make notes and then keep integrate them into writing in their writing in future. And as I said, that inputs are very important because they help us grow, do better, and learn more. Thanks a lot. You're doing a great job. Thanks.
Thank you. I just would like to add Nizar. I hope I'm not Nizar. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Nizar from Alapi. Nizar Alapi. Yeah. She has written her article on transgenders who have committed suicide in Kerala. There have been under mysterious circumstances. Very, very it is very shocking, and it's I think it happens everywhere, and it's shocking that one of them is basically, I was just reading a story about how a government of was it Chhattisgarh, which is giving 1.5 lakh to change the gender. I hope it's called what's that operation called? Anybody can give me the name of the. So there is one of the people who died in Kerala, which Nizar mentions, is somebody who wanted to go for this reassignment surgery, and she evidently ended up at a wrong doctor there were so many complications, and she kind of filed a case against it. But unfortunately, the government, she did not get any justice, and she was into depression, and then she killed herself. So similarly, there are at least 3-4 stories, and she talks about all these killings. I think that is very important that we talk about them. See, there are a few events that happens at different points of time, but there is a connecting point, and that she has brought in, and she's kind of left a lot of questions to be answered. I just hope governments take notice of this, that and then there are these untouchable huts, menstrual huts ke bare mein. That is another story, very, very heartrending story on how there's still this in a few, not just here in Kerala. She spoke about a place where this happens with the tribal community, but there are a lot of other the very interior areas where this is there. So I think as journalists, if we should bring them to light, and we should kind of bring it to the notice of the people. We have to talk to the NGOs, maybe support them with these kind of stories. I think that's again another that Nizar's stories are very impactful, and I really like the topics that she has chosen. And on one side, you have a government giving. Look at the stories we have now. On one side, we have written about a government which is actually supporting the surgeries, and on the other side, we have somebody who's actually putting her hard-earned money into the surgery, and then ending up kind of killing herself. So yeah, this is what happens when you look at all the stories in one go. I think, Supriya Dash has written on Surrogacy Act, impose more checks, less balances. So that is a very long story. So I have I have one problem, Supriya, with your story, that it's too lengthy. And also what happens is, I know you're trying to put in various sides of the surrogacy, but in doing so, there is a little clarity missing. I think just go over it and then see what can be done. Maybe each can be explored separately. Yes, the surrogacy has issues. There are pros, cons. Like, for example, she has mentioned very interestingly that it is considered as some act of charity in India. I mean, so the people who are becoming surrogate mothers, they don't even have a choice of becoming commercial. At least they don't have that. And there are a lot of issues about pros, cons, and how what does the law tell, and why it's not working, or why the law will work, can work, where the law is working, where it's not working. But again, it's a lot of information in one article. So women reproductive health and menstrual hygiene, so basically very nice articles, but this particular article I thought was very close to my heart, and I thought, I was very glad that you put in a lot of. One thing is that your articles have a lot of resources, you speak to a lot of people, so I think that is where you're doing a great job. That is what every one of us has to do. But again, too much of information can kind of put you in a place where you want to use everything, and so then there are a couple of other stories like Odisha discovers road for child marriage free state and all that. So, but more than that, the reproductive health article and surrogacy article is what I loved, and I wish it has a little more clarity. And then there is another article in Tamil. So, feminine violence, the bitter truth of India's dark side. So as I said, I have to really recollect of my views. I wrote, but I wrote everything. A rainbow fighting for self-respect. Just give me a minute. I'm just opening this. Yeah. So you also have a lot of details here, but perhaps you could kind of sort your thoughts and think of the objective. And yeah. Are we approaching gender equality for people with disabilities? Again, a very important article. Reproductive health is a fundamental right. So basically, all your articles are very important, and especially on the disabilities, people with disabilities. So I was hoping that you will go, you will use all this information to kind of come up with more articles. It could be focusing on one aspect of this and kind of exploring that, because I think you have touched upon many things. And are we approaching gender equality for people with disabilities is very important. I think women with disability and transgender people with disability, that's another very important aspect. I don't remember where there's one more story I read about this, where women with disabilities were going through a lot of issues. I think it was a story on leprosy survivors. I think part of that story talked about it. Right now do not remember exactly, but again, that is, as I said, there are two things out of this whole stories that I thought we can explore, whoever has written them, that the religious divide, how it's affecting gender issues and fight for gender parity and everything. So, and also the people with disability, women with disability have a special set of problems, and I think that again has to be explored, and I'm glad so many people wrote about CWDs. I think that is very heartening. So I think more or less I've covered everybody, and I've also, I think, in the whole of my discussion, talked about all the points I wanted to talk about, and whatever I said is in a generic sense. Again, I repeat that has nothing to do with the quality of the articles, but what could be done, what the scope is, what I wanted to talk about. So I think more or less I'm done. If anybody has any questions, they can talk to me about it.
Yeah, this is Srinivas.
Hi.
Uh, I'm very much thankful to Lordly Media for giving me opportunity to write and explore new areas, especially with gender perspective, especially to write on marginalized sections like Dalits and Adivasis in the remote areas like Adilabad. Certainly, I promise I will extend uh, new perspectives. I will come up with new perspectives with a lot of information in the coming days and these areas where we can explore new things and come out with new angles. Certainly, I will do that. Thanks a lot for giving your feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Srinivas. I like reading about the Adilabad people and a very important subject about how they are kind of falling back on things because they cannot find good translators. That was a very important subject. I don't think many have written about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, anybody would like to?
This is Swati, Swati Thapa. I wanted to ask a few questions regarding the writing only because the articles that I wrote, the articles which have like human stories to it is something that I don't struggle with. But when the articles just get a little more technical, like my article on HPV vaccine, it had a lot of data and a lot of science and everything. It was a little harder for me to put it in a place or put it in a more organized manner where it's more interesting to people because at the end of the day it is technical stuff. So like how and like what would you suggest for us to put it in a way where readers also find it more meaningful?
Yeah, that's a good. I would to begin to tell that you have almost successfully because I've never mentioned here that you have too much of. So basically, more or less, you have kind of managed to do that. You have managed to kind of add your technical details and data, which is a part of all. See, everybody has to write articles; they have to put in data. But when it, as you said, when it is too much of data and when you have to put it and it's important, you can use your tables and data graphs. Sometimes the data, if at all there's a it's a particular study and it's a recent study. I think they are doing it. If you go to our agency copies and all, they also have the graphs also with them. So what happens is when there's a graph, reading data can become, you know what it is. We read too many numbers, we get lost in the numbers. Even when we are reading, even if you want to read, you lose your perspective and you lose your train of thought. So you can have these graphs, or you can kind of, since you write feminism in India, I'm sure they have the mechanism. If they can get somebody to tabulate it and kind of make it in a graph, because Google has these graphs where you can put in your numbers and you get your graphs. And there are a lot of tools, free tools available. So if there's somebody who can do it, if you do not have time for you, you can use this and refer to this graph and use only the points that you need to talk about to bring that to make your point stronger. You don't have to tell about the entire thing. So what happens is the rest of the thing that they need to know, that is always there. It's easier to see, a graph or a table of data. When you look at it, you immediately understand the numbers. But if I'm reading the same thing in a paragraph, I get lost. So even whatever point you're trying to make they will not reach them. They would have already lost the train of thought. So they'll get lost in the numbers. So if there's too much of data, that danger is always there. So that's why even when you see when there are huge stories being written, you have second pages full of graphs and all that. Even newspapers always have this thing where there's too much data, or where some exit polls are there, for example, or too many. There's some study which has recently been launched or released. They usually give the data and they make different 2-3 stories. As I said, when you yourself see the data, what story you're working on, apart from that, you perhaps will look at another story also, because that will be more clear for you. Even as a journalist, when you're working on a story, seeing data in a tabular form in front of you as graphs, one is large, one is small, you immediately get a perspective about what you're trying to say and what you may. There are also other focus areas that perhaps you might have missed out when you're actually reading the numbers. So I think that's something to get external help.
Hello, ma'am. I'm Supriya Das from Odisha. Thank you for your feedback. मैम एक्चुअली जब फील्ड में ये टॉपिक को ये सब्जेक्ट के साथ में गई तो इतने सारे एग्जाम्पल्स मिल रहे थे. जब मैं लिखना शुरू करी तो मुझे ये लगा कि किसे मतलब इंक्लूड करूं और किसको एक्सक्लूड करूं, मतलब उनसे बात करते करते इतना सारा बाइट्स हो गए थे तो उसको कुछ नहीं कर पाई। एंड ऑफ द डे उसको सारा मैं अमालगेट करके लिख दी। फिर बाद में मैं खुद जान पाई कि बहुत ज्यादा लंबा है, पढ़ने के लिए उतना पेशेंस भी किसी के पास नहीं रहेगा। फिर एक बार मैं कर चुकी थी तो उसको और मैं उसके ऊपर और ज्यादा कुछ नहीं कर पाई एंड ऑफ द मोमेंट।
नहीं वो हम सबके साथ होता है सुप्रिया, राइट? सुप्रिया, हम सबका वही प्रॉब्लम है। थोड़ा स्टोरी में कभी कभी ना बहुत कम होता है, कोई कंटेंट देने वाला नहीं होता है, कोई अपने को ये मालूम है होगा लेकिन उसका कोड देने वाला नहीं रहता है, उसको ऑथेंटिकेट करने वाला कोई भी नहीं मिलता है, वो अलग स्टोरी है। लेकिन कभी कभी ऐसा होता है कि इतना सारा व्हेन यू स्टार्ट वर्किंग मोर हार्ड ऑन इट, सडनली यू हैव टू मच ऑफ इन्फॉर्मेशन। अब क्या करें इसका? तो आई थिंक दैट्स वेयर अगेन यू आल्सो हैव टू सी, बिकॉज इंटरनेट इज अ बिग प्रॉब्लम। सी अब देखो आपका स्टोरी कैसा दिखता है ऑनलाइन में, बीच में 1000 एड्स होते हैं। वो खुद वो एड्स का मतलब ही होता है कि दे आर ट्राइंग टू डिबेट people from reading. Suddenly when they're reading they'll say, oh, 100% discount on so and so, but 100% koi nahi deta hai discount wala baat. But I'm saying, for the sake of saying that there's some ads are there, then there are your other headline stories that are coming up, there are breaking news. हर न्यूज़पेपर में अलग सीन था, एक स्टोरी पढ़ रहे तो वही दिखता था। तो अभी तो इतने सारे हैं, तो आप वो दैट प्रॉब्लम हैज बीन देयर इन व्हेन यू आर राइटिंग न्यूज़पेपर स्टोरीज, अभी भी है। तो न्यूज़पेपर में एटलीस्ट यू कुड पुट इट इन अ टेबल. Now here perhaps you have to take, I don't know if they were ready to give you pictures, but what you could have done, this is just what we could do, perhaps take a few of the important ones, one line कहीं से यहाँ से वहाँ से, फिर अलग से more stories ऐसे करके कुछ देना पड़ेगा. I think that's the only thing you can do, because उसमें से भी your story should have quotes from there. You should not exclude them totally. लेकिन वो जो चलो एक पूरा स्टोरी बताया, उनमें से 2-3 पॉइंट्स निकाल के आपके स्टोरी में यूज करो नैरेटिव में, फिर वो अलग से एक और बार आप, अगर लगता है कि और भी इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट्स हैं तो उसको अलग से एक बार आप नीचे से फिर से आप, आई थिंक दिस इज जस्ट वन सोल्यूशन, perhaps you to explore about more solutions. So this is a problem which we all have. One more thing is, ऐसे स्टोरीज में लगता है कि सबका इतना कहानी है कि किसी को, see I can understand if somebody is giving quotes for popularity, अरे इसका छोड़ देंगे, या ऐसे ही बात करते रहते हैं करके थोड़े थोड़े ऐसे करके हम लोग निकाल देते हैं, ये रिपीट कर रहा है या बहुत बर्बाद कर लिया, ये ऐसे स्टोरीज में कहाँ निकालेंगे? सबका तो कहानी, हमको हमारा मतलब ही होता है कि सबका कहानी छापे, सबका कहानी फोकस में लाए. So I think we have to somewhere find our own, everybody of us has to find our own methods. So your narrative should not go, storytelling should not go in getting इस चक्कर में, वो बस इसीलिए कि लोगों का अटेंशन कम है. अपना एक और प्रॉब्लम है कि we have to make our stories, people should read our stories, that's the thing. Or actually I do not know if all the newspapers do it nowadays, everybody is doing it. I think Shada, probably we could perhaps think about that, but हर स्टोरी का ना एक इंटरनेट में एक स्टोरी होता है, इंस्टाग्राम में स्टोरी होता है, तो ये स्टोरीज को ना इंस्टाग्राम में अलग अलग स्लाइड्स में लगा के आप डाल सकते हो. आई डोंट नो इफ all the publications are active on social media, but your story can be converted into whatever you couldn't put in the story, or you want to focus on the story, you can put that and give the link to the story. You can use these quotes and make slides, एक 4, 5, 6, 7 स्लाइड्स लगा के इंस्टाग्राम में डाल दो, फेसबुक में डाल दो, वो पढ़ेंगे और तुम्हारे स्टोरी का लिंक वहां पे.
एक मेथड मैंने अप्लाई किया है, तो उसमें से थोड़ा थोड़ा इश्यूज को अलग करके मैंने ऑलरेडी टीवी का जो मेरा प्रोग्राम है उसमें मैं इंक्लूड करके एक एक टॉक शो अलग से कर रही हूँ.
वो भी कर सकते हैं. एग्जैक्टली, एक्चुअली वी पुट इट एज इट कुड बी. ये क्या होता है कि इस चक्कर में यहाँ पे चला जाता है, और हो सकता है आप जैसा बोला कि बड़ा स्टोरी हो उसमें, तो और थोड़ा एक्सप्लोर करके उसको अलग स्टोरी बनाएंगे. सी बेसिकली एक्चुअली, हालांकि हम बोलते हैं कि इंटरनेट में अटेंशन स्पैन 800 वर्ड से ज्यादा नहीं रहता है. व्हेन यू आर राइटिंग अ लॉन्गर स्टोरी, परहैप्स यू कुड थिंक एंड मेक इट इनटू अनदर स्टोरी, so that you don't get, and connect both. You can always give hyperlinks, no? So you can connect both. तो ये स्टोरी में हाइपरलिंक दो, इसके बारे में और पढ़ना है या इसके बारे में एक और पर्सपेक्टिव देखना है, तो क्यों एक ही स्टोरी में रहे, एक और स्टोरी में दे दीजिए ना. स्पेशली ऑनलाइन जो काम करते हैं जर्नलिस्ट, आई थिंक वी शुड डू दैट, बिकॉज नोबडी विल रीड आवर 1600 स्टोरी, ये नहीं पढ़ता. सो इंस्टेड ऑफ गेटिंग लॉस्ट इन दैट होल थिंग, ये बहुत पढ़ लिया बस बोलने के बदले में, अगर वो दूसरा पर्सपेक्टिव है या वी टॉकिंग अबाउट अ डिफरेंट एंगल टू इट, उसको अलग स्टोरी बनाओ, अलग हेडलाइन बनाओ. So that is another way of doing it.
That's a very interesting insight. I hope all of us who are listening to you apply it, because there's so much information we get, and we really feel like putting everything in the story because we are so excited about it. But maybe breaking them into smaller stories and using various social media platforms to write and talk about it, linking it to the main story is, I think, a great idea. Hello.
Hello, good evening, ma'am. Yes, absolutely. You and Sharda ma'am both are absolutely right. I did, use this experiment in, my 2-3 stories on different issues, particularly on mental health. Because when we write, when we talk to victims or to the survivors, so there was no exact word limit in our mind. So I used to break these stories or in a series way. So absolutely you are right, ma'am, that's a great idea. Ma'am, my story for Ladli was on working women's mental health during lockdown. I mean,
मैंने पढ़ा वो story. I'm
Yeah.
just looking about what I wrote about that story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically it's a caught between work from home and work for home. And this is basically, I tried to highlight the issue of metropolitan working women's life and their, mental conditions, because they are totally dependent on domestic help. And at that time, they all are deprived from that. And the role of caretaker, the role of, a mother or a wife. So how it impact their financial independency and how they lost their jobs. My question is this, ma'am, to you, that it was very difficult at that time when I was writing that article. There was no data actually, and I tried to include all angles, be it a domestic violence, because if you remember at that time, ma'am, there was so many women were facing domestic violence across globe. So it was very difficult to find out data and compare those data, giving the contradictory pictures, government data and NGOs data, both were telling different stories. And I am a bit prone to to add more and more data to my story. So maybe it is my I can't say in a words. Yeah, ma'am, please, I want your feedback.
Yeah, Nargis, I think I got a little confused, I think, with the person here. As I told you, I've read too many stories. I think I have not read your story, but I can relate to it because we've all written about domestic violence and we've all written about once the story started coming in. And yes, I think when you write, I would really love to read your story. Perhaps you could send me a link. So the point is, we have to do something about this. We cannot, when you have too much data, I think we have to resort to one of these. One best thing is to put it in tables. Best thing is, this is not now, it's not a news story. Like even when you're writing for newspaper, remember so many, now we are calling it infographics. Okay, so earlier days we used to have a person who would make graphics, and now if it is as I told you, if it is a mainstream government related data, we actually have agencies also give us tabular data, graphs and everything. They make colored, wo jo hota hai na, upar a panel aa jata hai apne paas. I don't know if you remember. So they have everything: population of the state, population, people who have read, if women who are not studying, all that will come in different colors and all that. So very easily understood infographic. It's not just graphs. Same information in a very small, easy to understand table format. वो tables बनाते हैं. So I think, if I do not know how you operate, where are you from?
Delhi, ma'am, Delhi. But ma'am, my problem was that at that time कि जो data था वो बहुत NCW का suppose data है या किसी employment का तो there wasn't any data we found. तो वो उसका एब्सेंस था मैम. और अगर मैं किसी चीज को डेटा से प्रूव करना चाहती हूँ तो दैट वाज वेरी डिफिकल्ट फॉर मी एट दैट टाइम कि हाउ कुड आई सपोर्ट माय फैक्ट विद फिगर्स.
not always easy. See, this is a very complex, very detailed subject of how to get data. That is, there is a different. There are also courses and workshops on it. Maybe we could find that, and one of us, see, all of us, we could check out if there are any cheaper available sources on studying about data analysis and all that. So there we learn about, like, for example, you have fact checking classes. I have attended a few fact checking classes. So there are tools and ways to go to sites where you can get this information. If you don't get this information, I mean, this is basic thing for anybody. As I said, it's not as simple as I'm saying. मैं ऐसे एक सेंटेंस में बता दूंगी तो बस हो जाएगा, ऐसा नहीं है, बहुत ही ज्यादा काम है ये. But point is, you can go to different organizations and look for the number of employees, look for how many people they have, basically you have to go to different websites. If you really want to work on those data without getting the official data figures, it's a lot of work. What I'm saying is, to do that, at least we have internet. So we can get information about how many people are there, let's say in Deloitte, and obviously they're all working from home. Usme se kitne women employees hai? Deloitte would have announced it, women employees. I'm just choosing Deloitte for the sake of representation. It would have announced the number of women employees that they have online. So this is all investigative journalism, and this is basically another subject for which you have to do a lot of effort. Now, when you have two different data on what to believe, obviously journalistically what we do is we present both the data and say, okay, NCT government ऐसा बोल रहा है, लेकिन ये private organization ऐसा बोल रहा है, private organization का authenticity क्या है करके हम लोग बता सकते हैं, और दोनों का comparative analysis दे सकते हैं. We cannot, as journalists, judge anything. We have to base it on certain analysis, and we can say it is indicating there is no data. We have to say there's no data. Same journalistic rules here. The only thing is, if you really want to create a story and you really want those data and everything, you have to go into investigation. And right now, at least investigation has become easier, I feel. Earlier, we have to know the person, we have to talk to them, we have to have network. Abhi thoda sa easy ho gaya because everything is online. So one of the amongst the very few good things about internet, this is one good thing that we can actually reach out. So you can actually take sample size of at least 4 organizations and then go to their websites and do it and say, amongst this many organizations, I found this data. This is your analysis. Anyway, you cannot authenticate it. You are not a data. You cannot authenticate it. You can still say that I have worked on it and this is what I found. Beyond which I don't think we could do anything. Yeah.
और मैम फाइनली फिर मैंने उसे समअप जो किया, तो मैंने वो ऐसे ही किया आर्टिकल समअप अपना, कि वो पूरे लॉकडाउन दो नहीं, इनफैक्ट बहुत सारे लॉकडाउन्स दिल्ली में तो छोटे बड़े सब आए थे, ऑफिशियल अनऑफिशियल सब, लेकिन कोई एक प्रॉपर रिपोर्ट ही नहीं आई मैम किसी भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ने. आई मीन इट वाज सो स्ट्रेंज. गवर्नमेंट तो हम क्या अब कह सकते हैं, लेकिन किसी प्राइवेट स्टेक होल्डर ने भी कोई ऐसी रिपोर्ट बनाने की जरूरत ही नहीं समझी कि कितने औरतों का जॉब लॉस हुआ है, बिकॉज इट्स अ क्वेश्चन ऑफ फाइनेंशियल इंडिपेंडेंस.
In fact, that could be an article for now for us, all of us. We could also explore it in each of our cities, that how many people have lost jobs, how many people could get back, because getting back is not easy. So actually, there are some companies which have announced that they will take back the people who have lost jobs can apply. ऐसा भी हो रहा है. I think
मैम UN Women की there was one report, उसमें उन्होंने कुछ suggestions बताए थे, वो मैंने इंक्लूड किया था. और रिसेंटली मुंबई में आई बिलीव और दिल्ली में मैम मिलिंडा गेट्स का विजिट हुआ था. शी अगेन रिपीटेड दैट फैक्ट कि कोरोना ने स्पेशली डेवलपिंग नेशंस की फीमेल्स को पर्टिकुलरली कितना उनको सेटबैक करा है. जो लॉस चला हो गया, जॉब लॉस, वो रिटेन हो नहीं पाया.
Yeah. So that itself is giving us a lot of, we have to talk about these issues. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Some organizations are actually announcing that they will take back. It's also a good sign. Yeah.
Thanks, ma'am, for your feedback. Thank you.
Thanks for writing such wonderful stories.
Any more questions or observations or?
मैं मध्य प्रदेश से प्रेम विजय पाटिल बोल रहा हूँ, धार जिले से.
बोलिए.
मैं आदिवासी क्षेत्र में काम करता हूं और महिलाओं की और खासकर बालिकाओं की समस्याओं के लिए वहां जो अभी आपने बहुत अच्छे सुझाव दिए हैं, सबसे ज्यादा हमें दिक्कत आती है कुछ कंटेंट रिलेटेड की, क्योंकि ट्राइबल इलाके में वहां की कोई स्टडी ना एनजीओ कर पाते हैं, ना कोई शासकीय एजेंसी होती है, तो हम लोगों की स्टोरी मुकम्मल नहीं हो पाती. इट्स नॉट परफेक्ट स्टोरी. Because we have not content, we have not authentic source. तो ऐसे समय में क्या किया जाए? और एक और जो समस्या होती है कि द ट्राइबल पीपल आर इलिटरेट, तो वहाँ उनकी जो कम्युनिटी होती है, जो उनके यूनियंस होते हैं, यदि हम लोग कई बार स्टोरी पब्लिश करते हैं तो वो एक एग्रेसिवनेस उनमें आ जाता है। तो इस तरह से हालांकि हम लोग उसको बचते हैं, देन आवर एडिटर आल्सो इसमें इंटरफेयर करते हैं और उसको बचाते हैं हम लोगों को। पर ऐसी चीज को सत्य लिखने में हम कैसे मतलब उसको मूव ऑन करें? तो सो प्लीज गाइड मी।
हाँ प्रेम जी, आई थिंक वो तो सालों से हमारे जो अवार्ड विनिंग जर्नलिस्ट हैं, जो बड़े बड़े, उन्होंने हमको रास्ता दिखाया है। आजकल के फास्ट ट्रैक जमाने में शायद मुश्किल है कि स्पेशली व्हेन यू आर डीलिंग विद ट्राइबल्स एंड स्पेस प्लेसेस, इवन ट्राइबल्स छोड़िए, कोई भी कम्युनिटी हो, उनके बारे में अगर हमको स्टोरी करना है तो हमको उनका ट्रस्ट जीतना बहुत जरूरी होता है। सी ऑब्वियसली कि जैसे अब रिसेंटली देयर वाज I mean, in the fellowship articles, I've read one story on menstrual health. जैसे मैंने बोला, again, I can't relate who's written the story. It's sort of my mind. But that story is also about how the tribals are not trusting enough of the authorities. They don't want to talk to people. They don't want to take their advice. They think it's beyond their culture to be listening, to be changing their ways. So ये बहुत सारी चीजें ऐसे हैं जो हर इवन एनजीओस को वही प्रॉब्लम है, हर चीज का वही, पीपल हु आर इनटू डेवलपमेंट वांट टू एजुकेट देम, दे हैव द सेम प्रॉब्लम। उन लोग भेजते हैं बच्चों को स्कूल को, सो दे आर होपिंग दैट नेक्स्ट जनरेशन एटलीस्ट विल स्टार्ट लिसनिंग टू देम। सो ये हर जगह पे है ऐसा प्रॉब्लम। और सोचिए ये अभी ऐसा है, तो सालों पहले जो जर्नलिस्ट ने जो स्टोरीज, इंसाइटफुल स्टोरीज जो हम लोग अभी उनका मिसाल लेते हैं, वो स्टोरीज कैसे बनाया होगा उन्होंने। आप तो जानते हैं इतने सारे हमें पढ़ते हैं और जो अवार्ड्स मिलते हैं लोगों को, बड़े बड़े रामनाथ गोयनका अवार्ड्स वगैरह वगैरह जो आर्टिकल्स के लिए मिलते हैं, उन्होंने एक दो दिन में नहीं किया है। या जब फोटोग्राफी करते हैं लोग, तो उनको तो इतने कभी कभी, अभी आई नो डायरेक्टर जेनिफर करके जो गोंड ट्राइब के बारे में एक आर्टिकल किया हैदराबाद में या अपना हमारे आदिलाबाद में, वो लोग भी बहुत ही वेरी वेरी closed kind of people they are, and she went and took their pictures, and she did a lot of work around them, and she's published a book. Now for that to happen, it took like 3-4 years. अब उनको कुछ और काम नहीं है, ये काम है तो कर लिए भैया, वी हैव अदर थिंग्स टू डू। सो व्हाट आई एम सेइंग इज, अपने लिमिटेशंस तो रहेंगे ही रहेंगे, परहैप्स अपने को ऐसा ही बीच बीच में जब टाइम है तो चले जाएंगे, उनको हेल्प करेंगे। आई एम सेइंग आउट ऑफ जस्ट माय assumption, and it's very wrong for me to assume also, because I have not done it इतना extensively with any of the stories की एक स्टोरी के पीछे इतने साल लग जाते हैं। You know, if you really need that kind of story, you will not get it in a day or two। जैसे गए ऐसे अपने, हमारे आजकल तो लोगों को आदत भी हो गई है, किसी के पास जाकर न्यूज़पेपर से आए बोले तो 4 बात के बजाय 10 बात बोलेंगे। लेकिन there are still some communities which do not open up, and even if they open up, if you really want the true story, आपको जो रटा हुआ नहीं बनना चाहिए, आपको कुछ और स्टोरी चाहिए, एक्चुअल स्टोरी चाहिए, और आपको जो ट्रूथ चाहिए, तो आपको तो टाइम लगेगा ही लगेगा। सो परहैप्स बीच बीच में जाइए, वहां पे उनसे बात बढ़ाइए, उनको हेल्प कीजिए। दैट्स हाउ यू प्रोबेबली इवेंचुअली, बेस्ट ऑफ लक, इवेंचुअली एक अच्छा स्टोरी, एक रामनाथ गोयनका अवार्ड वाला स्टोरी आ जाएगा आपके पास।
थैंक यू। आपका नंबर शेयर कर दीजिएगा देन।
जी जरूर।
थैंक यू मैम।
नमस्ते मैम, मेरा नाम सविता है, मैं बिहार से हूँ, दैनिक भास्कर में हूँ। और मैम जब ये मुझे मिला तो मेरे पास बिहार में ऐसे बहुत सारे टॉपिक हैं जिसपे लिखी जा सकती है, मगर कंफ्यूजन बहुत था कि मैं किस चीज पे लिखूं। तो ये कंफ्यूजन हमेशा बना रहता है, तो इस पे मुझे डालना है।
नहीं, आप हर चीज पे लिखिए। एक सेकेंड, आपका मैं देख रही हूँ, आपका नाम याद है, लेकिन आप फेलोशिप से ही है ना?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, because I remember reading your stories on Bihar. Yeah. Oh yeah. One of the stories was on the girls, the dance girls, right?
Yes ma'am.
Yeah. नहीं, अच्छे स्टोरी से लिखिए। प्रॉब्लम क्या है बोले तो, आप ना, ये क्या होता है कि अपने हमारा यूजुअली आजकल इंटरनेट जमाने में वी हैव दिस थिंग दैट you have to do 10 stories in a day, 5 stories in a day। इस चक्कर में क्या होता है कि ज्यादा काम नहीं कर पाते हैं हमको। बट देयर आर सम इम्पोर्टेंट स्टोरीज, उनके लिए एक आध स्टोरी के लिए आप टाइम ले लीजिए। क्या हर दिन का काम करिए, लेकिन एक आध जो स्टोरी है उनके ऊपर काम कीजिए, थोड़ा टाइम लीजिए, And what you're writing about are all important topics, but you have to write them a little more impactfully. थोड़ा impact होना चाहिए. आप impact ऐसे, you know how it is, no? You know the drill. जाके बात करेंगे तो अपने को perspective आता है. Perspective आने से अपना story perspective के हिसाब से आ जाता है. तो वो बस ऐसे peripherally देखे तो बस story है. बस you just are stating the fact. उसके अलावा आप कुछ हमारे को I mean you want to give us a perspective, then you have to work on it. So I think there is only one solution, that एक आध story दो तीन story जो आपको important लगे महीने में एक दो stories कर लीजिए जैसे you know, and then take some time, go to them, try to find people who can give you more inputs.
Thank you, ma'am.
And put it all together one day, one fine day you write a story and it.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure, yeah. I think it's important. I was supposed to come to Patna, but unfortunately, I'm not coming.
For that NWMI meeting, right? Something is happening in Patna. I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah. And I was also registered for it. I was looking forward to eating Litti Chowka and all that. But unfortunately, wo kuch
Sure, ma'am.
Okay.
I write a lot on food, so
Okay. Okay.
amongst other things.
Any more questions? Anything to add to what Rajeshwari has said?
Correct. वो फॉर्मूला में ऐसा लगा हुआ होगा h lookup c2+1 ऐसा करके लगा होना चाहिए फॉर्मूला में.
Sorry, कौन बोल रहे हैं?
तो नहीं है क्या h2+1?
I think mute पे लगाना बोलिए.
तो लगा हुआ है ना c2+1.
Please, आपको mute हो जाएंगे. Whoever is talking. Yeah. Any more questions? So can we close it? Hello. Okay. Looks like no more observations and questions. Thanks, Rajeshwari. It was so very insightful and nice, and very educating. And I'm really grateful to you for taking the time out and reading all the articles so minutely, making notes and sharing. I'm sure it has helped all the participants quite a bit. So looking forward to our association continuing in future also. And thanks Etan once again.
Thank you, Sharda. It was helpful for me also. It was very interesting, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm glad I took it up.
Thank you so much. Okay, good evening and bye to all of you. Have a good day.
Thank you, madam. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Bye. See you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Bye.